Hello, friends. We are back with another story. In this old book, a Ladybird book, we have two stories, but today I'm going to read one of them and I'll come back perhaps tomorrow and read the other. The one we're going to focus on today is called Red Riding Hood. And this book was first printed by Wills Hepworth in 1958. That's a long time ago, and that's where these pictures come from. Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there was a poor widow who had one little girl of whom she was very fond. The child was very sensible, and so, as soon as she was old enough, her mother, who was always busy, used to send her out on errands by herself. To keep her warm and dry, her mother made her a little red cloak, just the same colour as her rosy cheeks, with a hood which tied under her chin with ribbons. "There goes little Red Riding Hood," people used to say as the little girl went by with her basket. One morning her mother said to Red Riding Hood, "Now, my dear, I want you to visit your granny today, because she has not been very well." So mother filled a little basket with a dozen fresh eggs, some country butter, a homemade loaf, and a pot of blackberry jam. Then she tucked a clean white cloth over the basket, tied the red hood under her little girl's chin, and waved goodbye to her at the door. "Be sure to be back by sunset," she said, "and don't speak to anyone on the way." The grandmother's cottage lay on the other side of a large forest, and, as it was autumn, Red Riding Hood was glad of her thick cloak to keep her warm on the way. Look at this pretty picture of Red Riding Hood waving goodbye to her mother, and you can see she's got little buckle shoes on, and she's got the basket with the things in and the white cloth over them, and behind her I can see the washing hanging on the line in the cottage garden. And what can you see at the bottom of the tree near the path? I can see one big rabbit and two little bunny rabbits. And off Red Riding Hood went. She skipped along, not stopping to chase the leaves fluttering from the trees, or to talk to any of the animals she met on her way, although a squirrel dropped a nut on top of her head to make her look at him, and a deer peeped shyly from behind a bush. Now, in the very middle of the forest, where it was deepest and darkest, there lived a big, bad wolf. Red Riding Hood had to go right past the place where he lay to reach her grandmother's cottage, and when the wolf saw her go by, he said to himself, "What a pretty little girl! I wonder where she is going with her little basket." And in the picture we're looking at, I can see, obviously, the big bad wolf just hiding behind a tree, and at the top of the picture, I can see the squirrel that dropped the nut on Red Riding Hood's head, but I can't see the deer, perhaps because it's so well hidden in the wood. Mr. Wolf made up his mind to find out if he could find out where she was going, but as he was very cunning, he did not jump out at once in a rude way. Instead, he smoothed his rough coat as flat as he could, and putting on his most charming manner, he stepped out onto the path just in front of her. "Good morning, my dear," he said. "And where are you going to this fine morning?" "Good morning, sir," said Little Red Riding Hood, who had been brought up to be polite. "I'm taking this basket of good things to my granny, who lives on the other side of the forest." but I can't stop now, as I promised my mother not to talk to anyone on the way." Not far from where the wolf had been hiding, a woodcutter had been at work. The wolf did not know he was there because he had stopped cutting down trees to have his lunch, and the strokes of his axe were no longer ringing through the forest. As he was eating the bread and cheese which his wife had put him into a spotted handkerchief, he saw the big bad wolf talking to the little girl. "I wonder what mischief he's up to," he thought. And in this picture we can see the woodcutter is carving some bread with his knife, and on the red handkerchief on the floor, on the forest floor in front of him, he's got what looks like a bottle of water and a big hunk of cheese, and his axe is just on the grass by his boots. And he's looking back into the forest at the wolf talking to Little Red Riding Hood. And that's why he says, "I wonder what mischief he is up to." He saw the wolf say goodbye to Red Riding Hood and sneak away behind the trees in the direction of Grandmother's cottage. As the wolf could run much faster than Red Riding Hood, he got to the cottage first. The grandmother, hearing a loud knocking at the door, thought it was Red Riding Hood and called out, "Lift up the latch, my dear, and walk in." Then the wolf burst in. He turned the poor granny out of bed, pushed her in the cupboard and locked the door. Putting on her nightcap, which had fallen off in the struggle, he tucked himself up in the bed to await Red Riding Hood. In the meantime, Little Red Riding Hood went on through the forest until she came to her grandmother's cottage, not knowing that the wolf had got there before her. When she arrived, she knocked politely on the door. "May I come in, Grandmamma?" she called. "Lift up the latch, my dear, and walk in," replied a gruff voice. "How hoarse you sound, Grandmamma," said Little Red Riding Hood as she went in. "I have just a little cold, my dear," replied the wolf. "It makes my throat sore." What can you see on this page? I can see Red Riding Hood. She's opened the latch of the door and she's pushing the door of the cottage open, and outside there are lots of pretty flowers by the cottage window. But at the back of the room, wearing Grandmamma's nightcap, I think I can see the wolf, who's also wearing Grandmamma's glasses. It was very dark in the cottage because the wolf had been careful to draw the curtains before he got into the grandmother's bed, and Red Riding Hood could not see who was lying there. She did notice, however, that there was one large hairy ear poking out from among the laces on her grandmother's nightcap. "What big ears you have got, Grandmamma," she said in surprise. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf, hastily trying to push back the protruding ear under the cap. The wolf had perched the grandmother's glasses on the end of his nose. His eyes looked very large behind them. "What big eyes you've got, Grandmamma," cried Red Riding Hood, beginning to feel alarmed. "All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf, blinking his eyes very fast. Then Red Riding Hood noticed the wolf's white teeth gleaming in the light of the dying fire. "What big teeth you've got, Grandmamma," she cried, now very frightened. "All the better to eat you with, my dear," cried the big bad wolf, and he sprang out of bed. And he would have gobbled her all up, but at that moment the woodcutter sprang in through the door. Worried by what he had seen, he had followed Red Riding Hood through the forest, and with one terrific blow of his axe, the woodman killed the big bad wolf. The granny, meanwhile, was rattling on the cupboard door. "Let me out! Let me out!" she called from the inside. With a second blow of his axe, the woodcutter chopped off the lock of the door and let her out quite safe and sound. Then they helped Granny back into bed and gave her a fresh nightcap. Red Riding Hood made up the fire and prepared a cup of tea. She laid the table with all the nice things she had brought in her basket, and as they were all hungry after their adventure, they ate heartily. The grandmother also found a beautiful cake in the cupboard, which she gave to the woodcutter to take home to his wife, because she was so grateful to him for saving Red Riding Hood from the wolf and for letting her out of the cupboard. After tea, the woodcutter took Red Riding Hood by the hand and he went with her across the forest to her mother's house. The mother was overjoyed to see her little girl home safely and to learn that the wolf was dead. With tears in her eyes, she also thanked the woodcutter for what he had done. "You need not be afraid to go into the forest any more," he told Red Riding Hood, "because the wolf is quite dead and cannot harm you. All the same, it's just as well never to speak to strangers, and be sure to be home by sunset." And that's the end of our little story called Red Riding Hood. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you've heard the story before, if you've had it read to you at school, or if you're a grown-up now like me and you remember lovely stories like this from when you were a little boy or a little girl, put a note in the comments and tell me a little bit about where you think you first heard the story and perhaps who read it to you. Thanks for watching, and in the next story, I think tomorrow I'll read Goldilocks and the Three Bears.